30 kioltott emberi élet. 30 meggyilkolt asszony, férfi és gyermek. 30 ember, akinek a bűne mindössze annyi volt, hogy megvallották Jézus Krisztus nevét. Kedves barátaim, kedves hölgyeim és uraim, ismerve a keresztény üldözésnek az egyre növekvő erejét, arra számíthatunk, hogy itt Budapesten a 2 napos jelenlétünk alatt szerte a világban 30 keresztény ember életét fogják elvenni. 360 millió ember. Magyarország lakosságának a 36-szorosa, ez az a lélekszám, amelyik a világon azért szenved diszkriminációt, azért él a terror támadások árnyékában, azért szenvedi el a rendszer szintű üldöztetést, mert Jézus Krisztusban hisznek. Itt a CPACHungary nyilvánosságát kihasználva el kell mondjuk újra azt, amit nyugaton megpróbálnak eltagadni. Korunkban a kereszténység a legüldözöttebb vallás. És miközben minden másfél órában meggyilkolnak egy keresztényt a hite miatt, a woke kultúra követői az emberi jogi fórumokon nem hajlandóak erről beszélni, helyette inkább olyan emberi jogi kérdésekről tárgyalnak, mint hogy a transzgender sportolóknak meg kell adni a szabad sportág választás jogát. Magyarország fölismerte történelmi küldetését. Magyarország a világon elsőként 2016-ban egy kormányzati egységet alakított arra, hogy a világban azoknak a szenvedő keresztényeknek a szava és a hangja legyünk, akiket nem akarnak meghallani. Ezért indítottuk el 6 évvel ezelőtt a Segítő Magyarország programját, a Hungary Helps programot, aminek a keretében több mint 50 országba több mint 1 millió szenvedő, üldözött emberhez juttattuk el a magyar embereknek a segítségét. Véres terrortámadások után nyújtottunk azonnali segítséget a sérülteknek és az árván maradt gyerekeknek az ellátására. Szíriából és Irakból Jordániába menekült keresztényeknek adtuk meg a lakhatás és az oktatás lehetőségét. Bibliai tájakon, az észak-iraki ninivei fennsíkon segítettük a keresztényeknek újjáépíteni lerombolt otthonaikat. És amit semmelyik más nyugati kormány nem csinált, nem csak az otthonokat, nem csak az iskolákat, hanem nem behódolva a politikai korrektség semlegességének, segítettünk újjáépíteni a templomaikat is. Ennek köszöneteképpen az iraki keresztények az egyik káldeus katolikus településüket úgy nevezték el Bint el Magyar, Magyarország leánya. Az elmúlt 6 évben 1 millió keresztényhez juttattuk el a magyar emberek szolidaritását. Ugyanakkor 360 millió szenvedő ember mellett ez meg mindig azt a kötelességet rója ránk, hogy szövetségeseket keressünk a világban. Szövetségeseket, hogy a maradék 359 millió emberhez is eljussunk. Ugyanakkor a világ némán hallgat. Amikor 3 évvel ezelőtt dzsihadista terroristák Srí Lankában húsvét vasárnap templomaikban ünneplő keresztények közül 300-at meggyilkoltak, a világ eltagadta, hogy ez keresztény üldözés lett volna. Nyugati, amerikai liberális politikusok, hogy ne kelljen keresztény áldozatokról beszélni, kitaláltak egy új nonsense szót. Hillary Clinton és Barack Obama húsvét imádókról, Easter worshipekről beszélt. Majdnem napra pontosan 1 évvel ezelőtt Nigériában pünkösdi szentmisére rontottak be támadók, és 40 katolikus embert meggyilkoltak. Ekkor Hölvényi György barátunk és más keresztény elvű európai politikusoknak köszönhetően az Európai Parlament napirendre vette a keresztény üldözés problémáját. Tudják, mit állapítottak meg az Európai Unió vezetői a nigériai keresztény ellenes terrortámadásról? Hogy az nem vallási üldöztetés, hanem a klímaváltozásnak a hatása. Amikor Irakban jártam, és egy üldöztetést elszenvedett egyházi vezetővel találkoztam, elmondták nekem azt, hogy amikor egy síta ember bajba kerül a világban, egy síta ország a segítségére siet. Amikor egy szunnita ember kerül bajban a világban, egy szunnita ország siet a segítségére. És ők azt várták, amikor az iszlám állam kegyetlen gyilkosai népírtást követtek el ellenük, hogy majd a keresztény nyugat a segítségükre siet. De a keresztény nyugat végignézte, ahogy meggyilkolják és elűzik őket. És azt állapította meg ez az iraki püspök, hogy tévedtek, hiszen a keresztény már nem nyugat. És itt az a lecke, amit nekünk meg kell tanulnunk. Az a felismerés, amit meg kell tennünk. A kereszténység a világon 2 támadás alatt áll. Míg tőlünk keletre gyilkolják a keresztényeket, addig tőlünk nyugatra megpróbálják őket kiszorítani. Míg tőlünk keletre a kereszténység egy humanitárius válsággal néz szembe, addig tőlünk nyugatra pedig egy identitásválsággal néz szembe. Egyszer, amikor súlyosan traumatizált szíriai keresztény gyerekek között jártam, és próbáltam nekik bíztató szavakat mondani, a beszélgetésünk végén fölálltak, és elkezdtek imádkozni a nyugati keresztény emberekért. Elkezdtek azért imádkozni, hogy erősödjön meg a mi hitünk. In God we trust. Mi, akik összejöttünk itt a CPACHungary találkozón. Mi azt hirdetjük, hogy együtt erősek vagyunk. De azért vagyunk együtt erősek, mert mi bízunk Istenben. De vajon így van ez a nyugati világban? Erről fog szólni következő panelbeszélgetésünk, ahol a keresztény kultúrának bajnokait, keresztény civilizációnak védelmezőivel lesz tisztem beszélgetni, és így szeretném színpadra szólítani a spanyol patriotizmus hűséges szószólóját, Juan Sotót. Szeretném színpadra hívni a Heritage Foundation vezető kutatóját, Mike González-t. És megelőző beszélgetésünk során kiderült, hogy a legpontosabb definíció ez. Szeretnék színpadra szólítani egy hitvalló baptistát, a konzervatív politikai mozgalom veteránját, William Wolf urat is. Please take a seat. So, distinguished gentlemen, we have a diverse panel here who are in other way very uniform, very united in the cause of Christian civilization. It is a pleasure to welcome you, and it is my great privilege to host you as your chairman for this distinguished panel. In God we trust, but many people would in the West question if God exists. Nietzsche said that God is dead. The woke ideologues say that God is dead and any belief in God is anachronistic. And if you look around in our Western civilization, you have to ask yourself, and this is the question I would like to start with, did God die in the West? What is your opinion on that?
Well, absolutely not. We read in Genesis 1, the beginning of the Bible, that God made man and woman. In his image, he created them, male and female. God is not dead. Marx said that religion was made for man, not man for religion, and he got it completely backwards. God made man. We are created. We must worship. We worship the one true God. God is not dead. He is alive, and we worship him.
Well, thank you, Christian. Oh, actually, thanks to all of you for being here, and to the Center for Fundamental Rights, and to Miklos, and to Ernie Magar, who created this, who helped create it. The idea that God is dead is a political project. It's a political project that begins with Nietzsche. Well, it doesn't begin with him. Marx before Nietzsche, in the manifesto says we must abolish religion, we must abolish the family. The previous speaker referred to all these things. We must abolish private property and the nation state. So this idea that we must remove God from our lives, which is expressed by Nietzsche in the pithy phrase, God is dead, is a political project. It's a political project that, in a way, I've thought about this, what it wants to do is remove hope. Remove hope. God gives us hope. God gives us hope not only in the afterlife, but in the present life. And if you remove hope and man becomes hopeless, then man is desperate and seeks to change and transform society. And that is what the creators of this political project, that is very much alive today, and you're here today because we're aware of this political project and we want to fight against it. They want man to be hopeless, so man overthrows the system, society, and the previous speaker once again said they never say what they want as an alternative, but it is central planning, it is collectivism, it is dictatorship. So killing God, which is obviously impossible, is part of the process to herd us into a type of tyranny that all of you here believe we have to fight against.
You.
Well, it's fantastic to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation. Obviously, God exists regardless of how we feel about him. We just celebrated the resurrection of Christ. And I would say God is obviously not dead in the West. This is a living proof. We are here, are we not? So, furthermore, I would say that we are still a deeply religious civilization. We just happen to have substituted icons for idols, right? So we used to have icons that were meant, by definition, to evoke the divine beauty through nature or through the arts or even sex or politics as a public service for the common good. But we now praise to them, we now desire them, so they've become idols. And then there is this thing of a replacement effect, right? So we see new religions being increasingly present in Western societies, religions that are foreign to these Judeo-Christian values and therefore foreign or antithetically, against our civilization. One being Islam, for instance. I often get, especially in the case of Spain, that the West is this the result of this melting pot of civilizations. And my answer, especially pertaining to my country, is that Spain wasn't born with Islam, but fought against it, right? And the same would happen with the Church of Woke, or wokeism, because let us not forget, and Tucker Carlson spoke on these terms at your 50th anniversary, right? That this is not only an ideological battle, but fundamentally a theological battle. We just happen to, so again, we are still a deeply religious people. We just happen to have gone to the wrong gods, I think.
Let me just add briefly to this, because you refer, environmentalism is in many ways one of these replacement religions that Juan referred to. And a lot of times if we look at our pagan past, our ancestors worshiped nature. And I think we're going back to that. Earth Day is a new holiday, a new religious holiday for this new paganism of those who worship Gaia, the extreme environmentalists.
As surely as you sit in this room, the tomb of Jesus Christ is empty. Is God dead? Are you kidding me? Our God rose from the grave. He rose from the grave. He is not dead, but he is alive, and we worship him today.
Amen to that, and Christ is risen indeed. God is obviously alive. Yet we can all agree that the word of God is pushed out from the public domain. Those who proclaim the biblical teachings in the public domain, they are censored. In the case of Päivi Räsänen in Finland, they are taken to court and trial. And we see that Christianity is losing ground, especially in the Western hemisphere. It is losing ground more where Christians are not violently, physically persecuted than where they are. And our Christian values, the social teachings of the Bible are being undermined. But is there a way to stop this process? Can we perhaps inform our politics of Judeo-Christian values? Or to be more practical, can our children be educated in a way that shows the harmful nature of woke ideas to them and strengthens their Judeo-Christian value set?
So in the US, we have, and I don't know if we have exported it here, by the way. By the way, buy our cars and the things we manufacture. Don't buy the philosophies that we're sending back to you. We took what George Lukács, who's Hungarian, thought about and wrote about in the last century. We added value and we're exporting it back to you. So in the US, we have diversity, equity, and inclusion. And inclusion means the opposite of what is of the meaning of the word. It means exclusion. So a guy who was wearing a T-shirt with the word Jesus on it was kicked out of a mall by a mall cop because the mall cop said, well, that shirt does not have inclusive language. So we can see there how inclusion is perversely used to exclude our Christian beliefs. On the question of rights, it's a very simple equation. Politics depends on rights. North Korea, Cuba do not have politics because they do not have rights. Rights, the idea of rights depends on truth, on eternal truth and fundamental truth, because if we don't have fundamental truth, everything is relative. So crime, as is happening in America today, murder, rape, racism becomes relative. In truth, without the external authority of God, is unmoored. You cannot have science-based truth or evidence-based truth, to use today's parlance, because science shifts. You need God. So the equation is politics, rights, truth, and God. Without the beginning of that, without God, you cannot have the rest.
Christianity has always been a generational religion. If you're sitting here today and you are defending rights and truth and freedom in Hungary, I trust that you had parents and grandparents and great-grandparents who believed in the Christian faith, whether you're Catholic or you're Protestant, as I am. Christianity is a generational religion, and that means that we entrust it to our children, to our offspring. I have 3 children in the United States. I have 3 white boys, so I say that I'm on an FBI watch list somewhere. I'm sure I am, because I'm raising up some terrorists there in the United States of America, white boy Christians. And so we must entrust the faith to future generations. And that is the essence of the faith. 1 Corinthians 15:1, Jude 3, this is the faith once for all defended for the saints that we pass down to our family. So you must pass on the faith that you have been given, and that is what endures throughout the generations.
Yes, so along those lines, following the argument, that would also apply to overall political philosophies, including Judeo-Christian values, right? Because you just spoke of the Burkean notion of a social contract as this intergenerational agreement by which it's not a matter of what we can do about it, but what should we do about it? It's a matter of duty. It's a matter of responsibility, moral responsibility, right? To welcome, to cultivate, to strengthen really the legacy of our parents and the generations prior to them, and then faithfully pass it on to, in my case, to my 3 daughters, right? Also white, terrible. My wife's fault. So I think it's a matter of moral responsibility. And when it comes to education, what you just mentioned, so I think it's very clear for us all at this point that progressive liberalism has failed to live by its own proclaimed virtues, quotes, right? Which are neutrality predicated from the state and tolerance predicated from the citizenry. Have you looked at the latest anti-Christian exhibition in Brussels? That's not an exercise of neither of these, right? Neither tolerance or neutrality. So it's not neutral at all. The liberal values. So we have a responsibility of discharging ideology from our education and our children, and if anything, convey, those values that inform our heritage, the ethos of our country, which in this case are Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah, to tie these two ideas together, it is generational. In the place where we really should pass on our civilization and our culture is also the school. We cannot shy from this. The school is not just where we teach math and English and reading and arithmetic. It's also where we pass on the culture of the civilization of our ancestors, generational, as William said. We cannot shy away from this. We have to be very forthright about it.
Woke has no children. Woke has no grandchildren. Woke will colonize your children. So you either will train your children to resist woke, or woke will take your children in the public schools and convert them to their godless, progressive, secular, materialist, Marxist view of life. And you have to inoculate them against that woke virus or keep them at home, one of the two.
Also, one other comment, if I may. So when it comes to what can be done about it, so I believe that it is not by virtue of our enemies that we lost so much ground, but because of our own failures, because we failed to build on strong foundations, because we failed to live out our faith, because we failed to convey that, to receive that from our parents and to convey that to our children. So one thing we could do would be to be faithful Christians. That's a start, I think. That's a good start. So we should lead by example, I think, and the rest will follow.
I think the failure, and the previous speaker, who was quite good, I thought, referred to this, was that we actually let the cultural Marxists take over, and we allowed it to happen. It really begins, I'm writing a book right now on this, it really begins in the 80s. By the 90s, we were beginning to wake up to this, and then 9/11 happened, and we took our eye off the ball about what was happening in our own internal institutions. They took over the universities, they took over entertainment. It really was a failure of ours to allow the Marxists to, as Rudy Duchka said, to carry out Gramsci's program of taking over the institutions. I think finally, and your evidence of this, finally we have woken up to this and we have a response.
When we are making an attempt to save Christian civilization, it has been said that the most important part starts with the self, with personal faith. But we see that important players, those who control the earthly authority, are the governments. And you are now, I hope that you see this, you got this impression, you are in a country which is the land of the free. Free from wokeism, from the totalitarian ideas of wokeism. We are a Christian nation, and we acknowledge as a government that we are a Christian nation. But what are the limitations? What are the limitations that we have to follow when it comes to separation of church and state? In Hungary, we have a model. Someone very smartly put this, that in Hungary, church and state is separated, but not divided. The Hungarian government has allocated more and more funds in the last 10 years to support the church in those areas where it had the great responsibility before the Second World War, namely healthcare and education. And another question that is related, that does the inclusion of "in God we trust" on currency, on government buildings and other public spaces violate the principle of separation of church and state? Or is it a legitimate expression of national identity and values? What do you think about that?
Well, look, I want a separation of church and state, but I do not for a second want a separation of God and state, because the state always serves under God. And if you have a government that does not recognize God, then that government will play God with your lives. And so we want a separation of government and church, but we never want a separation of government and God, because if we do that, then like the Marxists, the government becomes God. And so I think it's entirely appropriate for a government to print things like "in God we trust" on our currency, because that's a daily reminder to every single one of you that your government recognizes that there's a higher authority that has given you your rights that do not come from government but come from God. and that they recognize that they cannot pretend to be your creator, because if they do, terrible things will happen.
By the way, this concept that this is separation of church and state, which if you ask Americans, 99% of them will tell you it's in the founding documents. It's not. It's an 1802 letter from Jefferson to the Danbury Baptists, and Jefferson, who had a lot of fights with a lot of people. He fought with John Adams. He was fighting with New England Congregationalists at the time and with Virginia Episcopalians, and he included this in the letter. And people say, "Oh, well, it's in the founding document somewhere. It's in the Declaration of the Constitution." No, it's in a personal letter he writes, all the Constitution says that the federal government will not have an established religion, will not establish religion. At the time, many states had established religion. So this is a misunderstanding which Americans have, which I hope has not come here. Also say, well, the Americans believe this. No, Jefferson believed it.
And the Baptists, this is so funny. So I'm a Baptist, okay? So I'm a Baptist in America. And the Baptists didn't even like that letter that Jefferson wrote them. They didn't publish it because they didn't want it to be out there. You know, it's a big misunderstanding in America. Again, there's no wall of separation between church and state. Again, we want our state to recognize that there is a God.
Coming from a Catholic teaching, in my case, so I would follow Pope Benedict XVI on this, right? He wrote in Deus Caritas Est that on this topic of separation of church and state, that these two are two distinct spheres, yet always interrelated, I think. And in this case, I think governments should make sure that, you know, everyone has the same rights, is equal before the law, okay? So equality with that surname before the law. But that doesn't mean that, so we've grown into this false lie, you know, into this lie that every civilization and every religion is the same, are the same. And that's not the case. Not every religion. So one thing would be equality before the law, and the other thing would be equality of creeds in a country. And I would argue that the religions that can uphold the values of the country, that welcome them, not only uphold, but add to it, should have a preferential position, obviously.
Thank you very much. Our time is up at this point, so I would like to conclude with something that I started with my opening remarks. Those heavily traumatized Christian orphans who had fled the evil of Christian persecution from Syria to Lebanon, and then when we have met, they felt the need to start praying for the European and Western Christians for stronger faith. I think they were very right in their wisdom to understand that it is not the physical persecuted Christians who need encouragement and faith, but us in the West. And I think that our main obligation towards our persecuted Christian brothers and sisters is to save ourselves. Save ourselves as people, but also as Christian countries. And if they see this discussion, if they hear your strong voices on that, they can be relieved that not all is lost in the West. So thank you for your coming here, and thank you for sharing your views, because we in Hungary, in a Christian country, we are safe to say these things. But I know that from you it takes courage to be a Christian speaker and be so strong on your Christian views. So I appreciate your coming. I respect your courage, and thank you for this encouragement that we have received. Juan, Mike, William, come back to Hungary. You can always find your second home.
Thank you, Tristan. Thanks to all of you.
Yes, well, thank you.
Thank you.